Okay, let's talk about performance data. Now, what is performance data and where do we get it from? So, we're looking at calculating the speeds that the plane needs to take off. Now, every takeoff is slightly different because every runway is a different length and we weigh a different amount. So, first of all, we've got to tell and work out how much we're going to weigh. So, we come onto the tablet that we have here that's called the EFB, stands for Electronic Flight Bag. Back in the day, they used to have literal bags with all the charts and things like that in it. But they're now transferred to a tablet, so this is why this is called an electronic flight bag. So we click on the picture of the scales, and we've got to set how much we want to carry. So we can set passenger numbers here. I'm going to set 238, going to go full passengers. Cargo, I'm going to put 3.1. That's not 3.1 kilos, that's 3,100 kilograms. If you have your settings in the imperial units, all of this will be in pounds as well. So fuel-wise, we're going to take 20 tons, roughly, something like that, 20.1. That's fine. So, speaking about fuel, 20 tons is good for about 2 hours of flight, and we're only doing an hour and a bit flight, so that's plenty of fuel. 40 tons is good for around 3.5, 4 hours, something like that. And 60 tons is good for right up to the maximum range, it's about 8.5, 8 hours, something like that. So just to give you a rough idea. So what we do is we load these figures in and then we click apply. And you can see the plane moves a little bit as it loads the fuel in. And now the plane weighs what we want here. So we can see our gross weight here is 122,406. 122,000 kilos, 406. So call it 125 tons. Sounds good, right? Now this little symbol here shows you where the weight is in the aeroplane, and this little number here we will have to remember for later on, but we all can access it from this page. So let's do the takeoff calculation. Do that by going to the next symbol up, which is a picture of a plane taking off. So makes sense. So we start here. TORA. What is TORA? Well, it's the takeoff run available. It's the distance of the runway. So we can type this in if we know it. If we don't know it, and we've already programmed the flight management computer, which we've done, we can take the number directly from the sim, which is this number here. Is it dry or is it wet? It's dry. Runway QDM, direction of the runway. We can also take that directly from the sim. If we know it, we can type it in. Wind, well, we're going to be calm winds today, so that's 0, 0, 0 at 0. So that's no direction at no speed, or you type in the direction with speed. Enter. Temperature, 15 degrees. QNH, that's the local pressure, is 1013. Now we're using fixed temp weather, clear skies, but if you're using real weather, how can we find this weather information out? Well, there's two ways you can do it, but let's look at one. So we go onto our menu, VFR map, and it brings up the world map, and we can click, we can zoom in a bit. It's a little bit awkward to get sometimes. If you double click on here, can you see it gives the weather at the bottom here? So this is the direction of the wind, this is the temperature, and this is the pressure. So we're not going to use this, remember, because we're using our fixed weather. But if you want to get it, that's a way to get the weather. And you can also go around the map and find any other airport you want, click on it, and it'll also show you the weather that's available there. Nice little feature. Weight, remember, we said, let's double check, 122.4. So 122, we're going to round it up, 5, enter, flaps. We're going to use these settings. So there's 15.0, so that's the first setting that we can take off with, 15.15, which is the normal one, or 20.20. So we're going to use 15.15. Anti-ice off, it's fine, it's not, we don't need it. Air conditioning on, it's pretty hot today, we'll take it off, we'll take with it on, and then we're finished, we click calculate. So now we get all of our figures coming on the right here. So flex, V1, VR, V2. What do these mean? This is what we tell the engine to bring the thrust back a little bit, because it's quite a long runway, it doesn't need to work as hard. It's a pretty complicated system, but basically we'll show you where you set that number, and it means that the engine's not working as full power when it doesn't need to. This is the speed at which we must decide to stop or go if we need to have a problem. This is the speed at which we'll pull back, VR. V2 is the speed at which we'll climb away. So we've now calculated our performance, and it's best to enter this into the FMC. So let's do that. Okay, so now we're in the FMC. So we go on our takeoff performance page. So the TO/APR, this one here. So we see if we click it multiple times, it takes us to the same one. And now we're going to just type in these numbers that we saw, remember? So let's go and double check those numbers again. We got 144, 146. Now remember, if you can't actually type this number in, try and do it. Doesn't let you. That's correct. See how it says brackets FCU? You must now bring your camera up like this. Set it manually in here. Okay, remember we said it's 150. We keep scrolling until we get to 150. And now you can see 150 is set here and it's set on there. Okay, next thing we're going to do is we're now going to tell the flight management computer how heavy are we, right? So we need to tell it how much do we weigh. Because remember, we've worked it out on the tablet, but the tablet's not connected to this. So now we click init. So remember, this is the page we filled out before. Now we go to the init B page. So this is the init A page, and we go to the init B page. So we do that by clicking next page. So see, now it's brought us across. So what do we do now? Okay, so let's type in some figures that we know. We type in how much fuel we have, which it displays to the side of it, so 20.1. And now we need to type in the 0 fuel weight and the C of G. Where do we get those figures from? Let's go back across to the... So we're on the EFB again now. We click on the weight, and 0 fuel weight, 102.4. Yeah, this figure here. Just rounding it up, remember? And also remember this number down here, 29.6. 0 fuel weight, 29.6. We type that in, and then 29.6. There we go. So now it has all the information that it needs. So now it goes, okay, and it starts to do some more calculations, and it says you've told it all the information that it needs now. So we are now nearly finished with programming this thing, okay? So we've done the calculating EFB, set FMS, init B, takeoff performance, we've done all of that, so we can tick that item. So now we're going to move on to the TRP. So this is this item over here. Repeat. So first of all, we need to select the flex TO temperature. Now remember, this was the reduced thrust setting that we were going to use that we calculated earlier. So we click flex TO, and we then set the temperature here. So where it says flex temperature. So we keep going until we see that 59 degrees. So if I then show you here, see plus 59, and we've set it here. This whole panel here is the thrust rating panel. So if you ever see TRP, it's this panel here. We've set it, and that's it. So we can have a look. Set, done, select auto, that's fine. Select toga, that's for something else, so we can ignore those. APU start. Now remember, this is if we haven't already started it. So we've done that, we've done that, we've done that, we've done that, and we've done that. External power. Now remember, with the external power, we selected it on earlier. So now we can turn it off, and we're ready to go. So that is the entire of the flight deck preparation checklist completed. And it's by far the biggest checklist. So we can now move on to actually start doing the before start checklist. Okay, moving on to the before start checklist. Cockpit prep completed. Signs on auto. Fuel quantity. We've got the fuel in there and it's balanced. Navigation. Making sure that both profile and nav are pressed and highlighted in green. You can see the green on the button there. Landing elevation. Set. Altimeters. Both of them set. Brake and anti-skid. Making sure it's a normal. Windows and doors. Making sure these all look good now, which they do because they're all closed. They show an amber if they're open. beacon on, parking brake is on. Okay, engine start procedure. What we're going to do is we're going to start both of our engines while we're parked, and we're going to do all the checklists while we're parked to make things simple, okay? So request pushback, we don't have to do this because we're going to start the engines here, but we're going to say that we've done it. Area start to clear. It looks good, it's clear to start. Ignition, we're going to put this to B, but you can use A or B, it doesn't make a difference. Engine to start switch, so this is this one here. We're going to press it and we expect the open light, which is what we've got. Engine to fuel lever, this is this lever here. We're waiting for this to go above 20%, so this number here to go above 20%, then we put the fuel in. We can see all the other instrumentation here, so above 20%, put the fuel in. And we see that we have temperatures rising, the engine's starting to spin a bit faster, and all the other stuff looks good. So ECAM engine status page, this is this. It's asking us just, does it look normal? But it will look normal, don't worry. Blue engine open light extinguished, so we're waiting for this light to go out, which it will do now. There we go, so it's gone out. And I can hear the generators swapping over, and it sounds like the engine is going to start well. So let's start engine number 1. Same situation, press the button here. Go down, watching to see that it goes above 20%. If you don't put it in by 20%, it's not a big deal. It's just going to reach the maximum speed at which it can turn the engine without fuel and just sit there. Okay, so we'll let it do that this time. So see, it's going 20, 23, 25. So it can't go any quicker. So it will just sit here now, but that's okay to also put the fuel in there. Again, we're just monitoring the instrumentation. It all looks good. There we go, and you see the screen's flickering, that's normal. Okay, so that was done. We waited for 20%, we checked that, and the blue light has gone out. So that's the after start procedure now. Ignition, we're in normal operations. We want to put it to off, ignoring the heavy precipitation. APU bleed, both engines are running. They are running, so we can turn this off. We're not going to do single engine, so ignore that. APU master as required. So both engines are running, they are, so we're going to turn it off. And we're not doing single engine, so we can ignore that. Anti-ice, temperatures are good, so we don't need to worry. Speed brake arm. Now remember, we wanted to pull this up, so you can see it says armed, and also there's a little gap now between the base and here. This shows that it's armed. Rudder trim 0. Slats and flaps, we can set them now. Remember, we calculated with 15-15, so this is 15-0, 15-15. So it's the middle setting, and you can read them along the edge. 0, 0, 15, 20, 40. That's just the flaps, on the other side is the slats. So 15-15 is 50%. Slats and flaps is done. Trim. Remember, we said it was 29.6, and that said it was 00. So it just happens to be, we don't have to set any trim. But if it said, for example, 1.0 UP, 1 up, we would set 1 up like this. If it said 0.5 DN, so 0.5 down, that would be here. So this is 1 down, 2 down, 3 down. But we need to set 0, so we've set 0. Done. So, after start checklist. Pitch trim, we've already set that. Rudder trim, checked it. Spoilers, remember, are armed. Slats and flaps, they're set for takeoff. ECAM status. So, on the top of this screen here, you would have a magenta status if there was anything showing. There's nothing, so we're good. Anti-ice, we don't need it on, so that's good. Hand signal, so on the ground we'd now have the hand signal to say you're good to go. So we are good to go. Taxi out procedure. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get the pushback, and we'll complete the taxi out procedure once we've done that. And I'm going to do it from the EFB. Okay, so how do we do this? Simply click on the plug. We can go prepare for pushback and departure, and it will sort the whole rest of the aircraft out so that everything's sorted for our departure, if we've got any doors open, things like that. And now what we do is we go, I want to push backwards. So I want to go backwards. If you want to go left, if you want to go right, you press it here. Or if you want to stop, you press stop. I think it makes sense. Now the easiest way to do this is to wait until you can see the aircraft actually starting to move slightly and then release the parking brake. Reason for that is if you release the parking brake now, it's just going to roll forwards and hit the tug. So it's best to just wait for that. So it should happen any second. So now you can see the aircraft is moving. We can go down here, release the parking brake, and we're going to be moving at a faster pace. So now we're pushing back. It's looking good. We're leaving stand. Leaving our stand 2-5 finally. So we will do this once the pushback has been completed. Okay, we're going to tell them to come to a stop now. And once we come to a stop, we're going to lean down, put the parking brake on so we don't roll anywhere, because we're going to be taxiing out on the line to the right. Okay, let's continue with the checklist. So taxi clearance, this is where we would get taxi clearance from air traffic control. We're going to say that we've got that. Nose light, we can put to taxi. Brakes, release. Now, once both engines are running, they are running, we're going to do this checklist now. Remember, we said we're going to do everything while we're completely stationary, so to make things nice and simple. Flight control, so we have to go down, select the flight control page, and check. So we're going to go full up, full down, neutral, full right, full left, neutral, and now with the rudders, full left, full right, neutral. So that's checked. We're not going to do this, let's skip this item. Altitude, first stop altitude. So what we're going to do to make our life simple, we're going to set our final altitude of 38,000 feet in there. Flight directors on, so we can make sure that they're already on, which they are. So where it says here, required autopilot modes. Remember we said we needed both these green lights on? Because I just adjusted this, it came off. That's why there's another reminder here. So we want to make sure, remember we have a green and a green. Nav, yep. And this will be the same on the screens. Water brakes, maximum. Transponder, we want to make sure we set this to XPDR, which is basically on. And we want to make sure we have the code that we were given by air traffic control if we're using it. Weather radar, we now turn it on, and we make sure that we've got, turbulence mode is fine. And the takeoff configuration test, we do another test. Now remember when we did it earlier, it didn't pass because we got the warning, but this time we're expecting takeoff test normal, so test is good. Okay, let's do the before takeoff checklist. Flight controls, they've been checked. Briefing, we're skipping that today. Slats and flaps, we've set it for takeoff, remember, 1515. Performance and FMAs, so these little blue writing at the bottom of the screen, we've checked that already. Takeoff configuration, we just checked. The transponder, we just set it. The cabin, all good. TCAS, so this mode selector now. TARA. The air conditioning system, remember, is on. We're leaving it on for takeoff. And the ignition here can come to continuous relight. So, next one will be the lineup procedure. We're going to do that when we get to the runway. Okay, so while we taxi out to the runway, let's talk about what we're going to do for takeoff. So we're going to keep things nice and simple. All we need to do for takeoff is the button on the left here that's marked toga. We press the button. The auto throttle, auto thrust system we talked about earlier will automatically set takeoff power for us. We don't need to touch it, it'll do it all itself. Then all we need to do is we need to pull back on the stick when we get to our rotation speed, keep pulling back on the stick, and then follow the green command bars, flight directors, whichever you want to call them, after we take off. So remember, these white dots here and these white dashes on the analog speed indicator, these are our speeds. So the first one is our decision speed, and the second one is when we pull back. So we're looking for roughly around that area for it to pull back and get into the air. Okay, that's all we need to do. Now once we get into the air, we're going to put the landing gear up. Once we see we're climbing away from the ground, we can do that by pressing G on our keyboard or your assign button on your Xbox controller, and then we're almost immediately going to put the autopilot in after we've done our first right hand turn, just so we have a bit more time to help me out, because this is quite difficult to talk and narrate and things like that. So how do we engage the autopilot? Well, you can press Y on the Xbox controller, that will actually engage the autopilot, or you can click either autopilot 1 or autopilot 2 on here. So it's up to you. It doesn't make a difference. They're both the same system. They're both fully independent. So I'm going to be using autopilot number 1 because I'm flying from the captain's seat. And then the aircraft will automatically fly most of the rest of the flights, but we'll get to that when we get there. So we are going to stop short of the runway, and we're going to do the very, very last checklist that we need to before we take off. Okay, line-up procedure. Line of clearance obtained. We've got that now. The brake fans, we make sure that they're turned off. External lights, nose light, we make sure it goes to takeoff. Land switches come on. Wing, that stays off. We don't need it for this flight. Strobe light comes on. Beacon switch comes to on, but it already is, remember. Runway and turn-offs come to on and on. Nav and logo light comes to system 1, which it is. So, ignition, remember we've already set it to continuous, so that's correct. PACs, we can ignore that because we're going to leave them on for takeoff. And TCAS is already TARA, so we are good. So, takeoff procedure. Now this is everything we just talked about, so we're not going to go over that, okay? Just talked about what we're going to do with the takeoff procedure. Alright, let's go. Alright, so remember we said we're going to press this button, let go of the brakes. We can see the thrust is automatically coming up, so that's correct. And we just hold the stick now. Next thing we need to do is rotate off the ground at the correct speed. Okay, engines look good. That's 100 knots. V1, rotation. Now we pull back on our stick. Following the flight directors, remember. Positive climb. Gear up. Okay, I'm going to put the autopilot on, autopilot 1. So now the aircraft's going to automatically start to accelerate. And what we can do is now we see we have this little green F, okay? Once we're 20 knots above it, so let's just roughly 20 knots, so remember 10. So this is 10, this is 20, so we're roughly 20 above it now. We can go with the flaps, one stage up, okay? Now, once we go above S, so once we're just above it, we don't have to wait for the 20, just as long as our airspeed indicator here is above the S, we can grab this and go to 0. And now the aircraft continues to accelerate on its own. And what we can do now is let's take a look at some of the checklists that we can do, okay? So, this one we said we did it, okay? That's just the procedure. After takeoff procedure, spoilers, disarm. We've done that. Landing gear off. Now you might say, what do you mean off? Well, it has down, up, and the middle position is off, okay? Like a Boeing. Packs, you need to make sure that they're on. We didn't turn them off for takeoff, so it's fine. External lights, nose light, off. Runway turn off lights, off. And landing lights can stay on till 10,000 feet, or if you want to, you can retract them now. It's not against, it's a company thing, so I'm going to retract them now. Engine anti-ice, we don't need it, we didn't use it for takeoff. Ignition, so normal operations, which we are, we can make sure this goes back to off, so we don't need it anymore. Severe turbulence, that's not applicable. APU, we didn't use it for takeoff, so that's fine. We don't have to worry about it. So after takeoff, checklist. Slats and flaps are retracted. Yes, they are. Landing gear lever, upper neutral. Yes, it is. Packs on. Yes, they are, because we didn't turn them off. Okay, the altimeters are set. Next is the 10,000 foot procedure, which we're going to minimize. So we are reaching 10,000 feet. The aircraft automatically wants to speed up, so it's going to go ahead and do that. And we can do the 10,000 foot procedure. We can pull for standard. So what's that? So basically, we have now set the standard pressure. If you don't know what that is, don't worry about it, because we're doing a clear weather flight, and if you're copying my flight, it will make no impact. Landing lights, we've already retracted to off. Seatbelt signs, we're above 10,000 feet, so we can turn them off now. Top of climb procedure, we're going to wait until we get to 38,000 feet for our top of climb procedure. Okay, so now we're climbing away. Some things that we should check when we're in the climb are, does our cruise level make sense? Well, we can see we're going up to 38,000 feet, and we can check this by looking down at the flight management computer. We can click progress, so the progress page here, and this is what this page is. So we can see we're in the climb phase, which makes sense, and it says our cruise level, so the height we're going to is 38,000 feet, makes sense. But then it says our maximum is 37,500, okay? And then opt stands for optimum. So this is what the flight management computer says. This is the most efficient level that you should be at. Well, you can see our cruise level is higher than our maximum level, and this can never happen, right? If you go above the maximum, you're going to run into all sorts of problems. So we need to update our cruise level. How do we do that? So pretty simple. We go up to the flight control unit, set 36,000, so now we have 36,000 here, and it's set here as well. And then we update the cruise level here, because the flight manager computer doesn't know that we've changed. So 360, put that in, and now we have all the information is matching. So now we can cruise at 36,000 feet, which is much closer to our optimum as well. So just important thing to check when you're climbing away. Okay, so we are now in our top of climb, and we're kind of quite near descent, fast forwarded throughout the flight, and we're going to do the checklist now. So, top of climb procedure, we want to make sure that this indicates cruise, so this is CR, and it will do this automatically, so unless it doesn't say it, you don't have to press the button. ECAM memo status check, they all look good. ECAM systems review periodically. So what we can do is we can go through the system display pages and have a look at them. Today's flight, let's keep it simple. It's going to be fine. We haven't programmed anything in. So flight progress, track and distance for next waypoint. It's also fine as well. We can just keep an eye on the route that we had in our head, so there's no need to do that. And flight progress, check fuel, fuel on board, FMS predictions. We know that's going to be fine. We've taken more than enough fuel. Descent preparation. ECAM memo status. Remember, we've just looked through it. There's no issues with it, so it's fine. Weather and landing information. Now, remember, we said that the weather en route is going to be absolutely fine today. So there's no need to go and try and get the weather for our arrival. We know it's going to be good, but if you were flying in real world weather, this is where you could go onto the VFR map or on the weather and collect the weather from inside the sim. Landing elevation, we've already set it, remember, it's 50 feet, we did that on the ground. Fuel, we know it's good. FMS, program as required. Now, there's not much to do in the FMS. You might think, thank goodness, because it took quite a while on the ground. But what we do is we click on Takeoff Approach. And once we're on the Takeoff Approach, we basically make sure that we have everything set in here. We shouldn't have to set anything. So landing configuration, 2020, 3040. Wind correction, we don't need to adjust. Approach speed, 140 knots. That looks good, so that's what we're going to be landing at. And this is our minimum, if you know what minimum is. It's written as MDA. For today's flight, let's not worry about it, okay? But this is something for a more advanced time, so we just leave it. We know it's a nice clear day. Everything else, it's fine. We just leave it alone. We've already programmed it, so FMS is done. So we don't have to look at that anymore. Decision height, we don't have to bother with that. This is if we're doing an automatic landing, which we're not. And then the auto brakes. Let's have a look at these now. So it says normal length runway, low, short contaminated runway, medium, short braking distance, max mode. Now that means manual braking, okay, because we have low, medium, max, but we should only ever use low and medium. Maximum is not recommended for landing, okay? You can use it, it will work, and you will most definitely stop, but it's not recommended. But you can use manual braking, so you can land and push the brakes all the way down. But Nice, pretty long runway, dry conditions, so we're going to use low brakes, so that looks good. GPWS flap selector, this is fine, this is if we're changing it. And approach briefing performed. We're going to say that we've done that now. Okay, so next thing we need to know is when do we need to start our descent down? Well, we have a few things that can help us out. If we look at our screen, the lower screen, the navigation display, we have this little arrow. Now this little arrow is the computer saying, hey, this is where I think you should start your descent. And it's calculated this all based on the constraints and everything put into the aircraft automatically, so you don't have to think about it. So it's saying, this is where I think you should go down. Well, how do we get ready for that descent? There's a few ways, but we're going to just focus on one way because it's by far the simplest, okay? So let's go onto the flight plan. We scroll, remember going the sort of wrong way down. And can you see we have this thing called the FF04 left here? So this is kind of our final altitude before we descend down to the runway, yeah? And we can see it's 4,000 feet, okay? So we know that our sort of final descent down is going to be 4,000 feet. So if I set 4,000 in the window like this, so 4,000's in there. Now all we need to do is when we get a few miles before this little arrow, we press this button again. We click it on, click it off, and we'll go down. And the aircraft will automatically follow the path itself. This is commonly referred to as VNAV, or coupled descent. And the A310 is fully capable of this. It's not as sophisticated as, say, an A320 or a more modern aircraft. That's because this plane's from 1982. To be perfectly honest, the fact that it has VNAV at all is a bit of a miracle. And the way it's represented in the sim is it's a bit better than the real aeroplane would have, if I'm perfectly honest, from reports of real A310 pilots. But it works, and we're going to use that for our descent, and it's a really, really nice feature. So next thing you'll see is us starting our descent down using VNAV, or profile as it's called on the A310. Okay, we're just shortly about to start our descent, and you can see the aircraft's actually changed its target speed. It will do that before descent as it gets ready to go in its descent speed, which is different from its speed it used to get here. So let's have a look at the descent procedure. We've talked about all of this really. Descent initiate, we've talked about it. That's what we're going to do. Ignition, we've already talked about that. We're not really going to be using it. Anti-ice, remember it's a nice normal day. We don't have to worry about that. And altimeters, at some point we're going to change it out of standard. If you didn't set it in the first place, don't worry about it. It's already going to be set. And then before reaching 10,000 feet, the seatbelt signs will come on. So we're gonna leave this bit open because that's the next bit that we're going to do. So see, we're a few miles away from our descent now. So what we do is we turn profile, we press it. So now what happens is the aircraft will start to descend down, and what it will do is it will go down at around about 1,000 feet per minute. And you can see what we have drawn on here is a little path. This little diamond shows us
where we're supposed to be going, and this is where we're going. Because we started it a little bit early, we're going to go underneath it, and then we'll catch back up with it, which is, that's normal, don't worry about that. Now, you might say, well, how do I know how high or how low I am? Well, what you can do is you can go on here, click on prog, the prog page, progress page, and here it shows you a number. So this is our VDEV, vertical deviation, and you can see that this is matched with that, so they're similar numbers. Okay, so now it's going to start to go down the path, and we'll watch the thrust come down, and it will start to follow the path. Now don't worry if it gets a bit above or below the path. Like I said, the A310, pretty sophisticated that it had this feature at all, but it will get itself back on path automatically. You can see it's doing that right now, see? So it's bringing the power all the way back, and it's going to get itself back on the path. And now we can just don't touch it. It will do the descent automatically, which is pretty cool when you think about it. And we can just sit here monitoring it, and it will keep doing its thing. Okay, so let's talk about how we're going to set up for the instrument landing. I've left this a little bit later because this is quite easy to do in the sim now. So what we need to do is we need to select this to ILS, because remember we said we're doing an instrument landing, yeah? Or if you're flying from the other side, you have to do the same on that switch. And now what we must do is we must set the frequency here for the ILS that we're going to land on. You go, whoa, 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 how do I find that? I'll show you a nice and easy way. So again, we go on VFR map, and this is where we are, and this is where we're flying. This is our arrival. So now what we do is remember LFMN, remember, that's our little token. Click on it, scroll down to the bottom, and you see it says ILS. ILS 04 left, so it says that the frequency is 109950. So 109950, so that's right. And the course is 042, so set 42 in here, and we're done. And again, we can look at the weather here if we need to. So that's it. I just left that a little bit later because obviously otherwise you have to scroll all the way through your flight to get there, so it's okay to do that a bit later if you want. So that's all set up now, and we are still on our descent. Now one thing to note is if we go on our progress page, you might think, well, why is it saying that we're really low now? That's because we had a restriction on the arrival to be below a certain altitude, and it made that restriction, and then it went, okay, but now I'm low, so I'm going to start to descend slowly and catch back up with my own profile. You don't have to do anything for that. It will do it automatically, okay? But just so you're aware, if you see that, completely normal. Alright, so we're approaching our 10,000 feet point now, getting a little bit high, so I just put some speed brakes out. So how do we do that? So you can see the speed brakes here, you can put them to 100% or 50%, and normally 50% is enough, and it's recommended when the autopilot is on, but you can use 100 if you need to. So remember, what did we say we're going to do? Exterior lights. So we're going to put the seatbelt sign on, which we're going to do now. Runway turn off lights, we're going to put to on, and the landing lights we're also going to put to on. So tick and tick, and that's the thing. So our next one will be the approach checklist. So let's do the approach checklist now. Signs, they're already on. Briefing, done already. ECAM status, remember we've been periodically reviewing it, but we're not really focused on that today. Altimeters, now we can unset standard, remember, so we push it in. If you didn't set it in the first place, don't worry about it. Minimums, we're disregarding that. Ignition, we can set this to continuous, and landing elevation already is set, so that's done. So how do we land the A310? Well, it's fairly similar to any other sort of big aeroplane, okay? It doesn't have auto trim like the A320, so that's something to be aware of. You have to manually trim yourself, but if you're new to airliners, then every plane is like that. My one tip would be when you disconnect the autopilot, which we'll do in just a second as a demonstration once the aircraft's straight, you have to press the button again to stop the horn going off, right? So if I press the button now, you see you get this warning, and you have to press it again to clear it, okay? So you disconnect it and press it again to clear the warning.
The other tip I would say for landing is wait until the aircraft has got the gear down, all the flaps are out, we're around 1,000 feet odd, disconnect the autopilot, press the button again to silence the horn, and trimming, be careful, don't trim it too much, okay? The aircraft's normally pretty good, and if you start to trim, you can get yourself fighting back and forth, and then there's no good to anyone, really. So they're my only tips, okay? So, we're now getting closer to the runway, and we can notice that some things have happened. So, do you see this little green reading here? DME. DME. If you're, like I say, used to light aircraft, you know exactly what DME is. That is the distance we have from the runway directly, okay? And that's now alive. So that's good, because remember, we tuned this frequency. If we change the frequency, see how it goes away? So we need the correct frequency set. There we go. So we've now got to start to think about when are we going to start to slow down and when are we going to start to configure the aeroplane. Now, pretty cool. The A310 is pretty smart. So it's already looking ahead and it's going, well, I want to level off. Remember the blue arrow, the level off arrow here. And I'm going to then slow down. So by the time I'm here, I'm nice and slow. So it's already thinking about when to decelerate. And what it's going to do when it reaches 4,000 feet is the speed will come all the way back and we can start to put the flaps out ourselves. Okay? So let's watch that. And remember, we're going to go with 15.0 when we're below 245 knots. So there we go. Do you see that the speed target changed? And the thrust is coming back automatically and it's starting to slow down. I didn't do any of that, right? This is, remember, I haven't really touched the autopilot since we took off from Ibiza. So, we're below the 245 knots, yeah? Let's take the flaps, one setting out, and we can see the flaps start to move. So, what the plane's going to do now is once it reaches this little green S, it will go, well, I can't really go slower than that, and it will add some thrust and it will stop at that position there. Alright, so now we're within range of the airport, so within around 20 miles or so, and we know we're going to land, okay? So let's press the land button, and can you see how we got lock star, okay? Now this means that the aircraft is automatically lining itself up with the runway using the beam from this, like a localizer, like you would in any other aircraft doing an ILS, okay? So let's make our life nice and simple. Let's put our next setting of flap out. I just need to move my head slightly because the thrust lever's in the way. There we go. Here we can see the glide slope is coming alive. And the flaps are coming out. Remember, 210 was the limit for that. Now, I'm going to put the gear down. And once the gear comes all the way down, which it nearly is now, we can hear a lot more drag and things going on. We now have control of our speed. Remember, we said our speed that we want to land with is 139, so we can set that now. 139, so we have to set this manually. And now what we can do is we can set our next setting of flap. And we can set our final setting of flap. And look, there it is. There is Nice. We have made it this far. This is pretty good. I'm pretty excited. We're going to make it. A little bit of sightseeing while we're here. See this area here? Excuse my pronunciation, French people. But it's the Cap d'Antilles, sort of. But it's where a lot of very wealthy people live in the area of Nice. And normally around this little bay area here, you see enormous yachts. I mean enormous. I mean, they're so big they don't fit in the harbour.
So this is quite a beautiful area that we're coming onto now. But look, the aircraft has completely lined itself up with the runway. I can see the runway. We're going down the glide slope. Everything is looking fantastic. Okay? And that's it really. If you wanted to, remember I said you could disconnect the autopilot whenever you feel comfortable. The gear is down, the all configured. So what we can do now is we can do the landing checklist. Okay? So landing gear lever is down, auto brake is low, anti-skid, checking that it's in that position, slats and flaps are set, and the spoilers are armed. Nearly forgot that one. And the next one we're going to need is the after landing procedure. Okay, so I'm going to get that ready. Okay, and here we go, guys. Here we go. No pressure. Let's see how I can land this aircraft. All right. Talk. Can I walk the walk? Probably not. But we're going to wait till we get a bit closer, because I'm going to do what we said. I'm going to wait till we're about 1,500 feet, something like that, and then I'm going to disconnect the autopilot, just so you know I'm doing what we say, because the aircraft can fly this approach perfectly fine. All right, coming up to about 1,500 feet. Let's disconnect the autopilot. Remember, press the button, press it again, and now I have manual control. Just to prove it, you can see, look, I'm in manual control of the aeroplane now. And remember, I said one of the tips, don't mess with the trim. Okay, so you can see we're getting a little bit low, so let me pitch back up. But we were in trim, okay, so there's no need to mess with it. And the auto thrust will automatically bring the speed back under control. I'm going quiet because I'm concentrating too much, which is not good when you're trying to do a tutorial video, is it? So, what am I looking for when I'm flying? This is more of a general, what am I looking for? Well, I'm looking out the window, and I'm looking to see if things are moving up or down the windscreen. They're not, so they're in a nice stable position, so that looks good. And then I look back inside, and I look at the glide, and I look at the low glide, and go, oh, I'm a tiny bit high on the glide, and I'm a tiny bit off the low glide, so let's do something about that. There we go, so we're going to correct it. Alright, that's better. So now, while we're looking a little bit the other side, we're kind of doing a bit of a snaky S-turn, so let's correct that. Okay, looking good. So we keep doing this. We look at inside and outside, so I can see I'm a little bit off the localizer now. I'm going to do that to try and correct it, because it's not a big thing. And we're coming off the glide slope now, so I'm going to push the nose down to try and correct that as well. Beautiful day here in Nice, as to be expected. Now, when do you start to pull back to flare, to stop the descent rate in the A310? Well, it's later than you think, but what's going to happen is automatically at 30 feet, my thrust is going to come to idle, because the auto thrust will do it automatically, and I will need to pull back. So roughly around 20 or 30 feet, you need to start to pull back. If you don't, you're going to have a very bad day, and it's going to be a very firm landing, let's say that way. So now I'm just looking visually out the window, looking good. Aiming point is roughly where I want it to be. 100 feet, that's looking good. Not bad, I'll take that. Nose comes down, and you can see the automatic brakes have engaged, because you can see this little green bar. We can see and we can kind of feel the aircraft is slowing down. The ground spoilers have come out, we can see them here, and yeah, we're going to make it. So now I'm going to take over with manual braking just by pressing the brake pedal. You don't have to click this off, and we're going to take this exit here. Welcome to Nice Airport. We made it. I managed to not crack under the pressure. So what we're going to do, remember, idea with these flights is to keep things simple. We're going to vacate the runway, come to a stop, and then we're going to do the checklist, all right, and the items, because it's too much to try and do while you're moving, to be perfectly honest. So let's turn off the runway here to the left. And come to a complete stop. That'll do. So let's set the parking brake to on, and let's look at our checklist, okay? So, our external lights. So we can put this to taxi, which we've done. Land switches we can put to retract. Wing lights can come off, which it is. Strobe light can come to auto, which it is. Runway turn-off lights can come off now. We don't need to worry about the wing anti-ice. We never used it. Ignition, it's fine. Don't have to worry about that. APU, so we need to start our friendly auxiliary power unit again. Remember, we wait 3 seconds, and then we press the start button. Ground spoilers, so remember we said that they are now up. When we do this, that brings them down. Okay, so when we armed them, when they landed, they came up. The process of pushing this handle down brings them down. So this lever doesn't physically move, like on a boat. Transponder, we set this to standby, so that's fine. Weather radar, put this to off. Pitch trim, now this is a definite gotcha, okay? So we must reset this to 1 up, okay? If you forget, it's not the end of the world, but that's what the procedure says you should do, okay? Slats and flaps, retract to 0, 0 in stages. So do it once, another one, another one, another one, like that, okay? Brake temperatures, I already heard the ding, so let's have a look. So it says hot, so we can put the brake fan on. This will cool them down quicker. That's all properly simulated. And the after landing checklist. So slats and flaps, retracted. Transponder is as required, because it's off. Weather radar, we know is off. Spoilers, we know are disarmed. APU started, because it's starting up already. Parking procedure. So now, let's get to the parking position. Alright, so we're just going to park here on the left on these remote stands. It's normally where quite a few of the big heavies and the big business jets park. Alright. And then we're just going to go straight. That'll do, bit of a violent parking. Parking brake is on, so now we can look at the checklist again. So, parking procedure. So, nose lights off. Parking brake is on. APU bleeds can come on. The APU is on, so that's good. So we can turn the engines off now. So we turn the engines off. So we turn off engine, well, it doesn't really matter which order, it's up to you. 1, 2. Elapsed timer stop. We didn't start the clock, not that important. Now when this number goes below 20%, remember, just like starting, we can turn the beacon light off. Cabin pressure, it's all good, it's automatically worked. Seatbelt signs, people are now free to scramble and open other lockers. Fuel pumps, we are going to turn them off, 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 the ones highlighted in blue. We're leaving these ones on. Probe heats, off, off, off. IRS nav switch. We're going to be, this is the final flight for today, so we're going to turn them off. So if the last flight of the day, it's off, off, and off. Brake fans, below 100 degrees Celsius, which they will be eventually. Done. Parking checklist. So, APU bleed is on, because it's as required. Engines are both off. Differential pressure, which is this gauge up here, 0. Lights, they're off. Fuel pumps off, the ones that are highlighted in blue. Window and probe heat. And now we can turn these off. Parking brake and chocks, so we've got the parking brake on, and that's it. The next one would be securing the aircraft. So let's go straight into that, because this is basically what we do at the end of the day, which is what we're simulating. IRSs are off. They're already off, remember, we turn them off. Crew oxygen, off. Exterior lights, off, off. APU bleed, off. External power. Now remember, it's not there because we haven't selected it in the EFB. That's fine, that's what we want. APU, we want to go off. This goes to disarm. Batteries. Off, off, off. And silence. There we go. We made it. We actually fully did our flight to Nice. I know there's quite a lot to take on with these videos, but I do hope that they help in terms of give you a broader scope of what we're trying to do with the checklist system. Okay. Now, what I recommend is just follow this flight. Do it 2, 3, 4, 5, however many times you want, or wherever you want to fly. Don't stop me, but you know you can follow along with the steps that I did here. Now, what we're going to do as the follow-on to this video is the same exact flight, but with more complicated procedures. So once you feel more comfortable, you can move on to that and do the same flight. I do really hope that this video was helpful to you. Let us know what you think of it, and we really hope you can get a chance to be flying the A310 as soon as possible. Thanks very much.